Picture this. You've had a hard day. Nothing catastrophic, just the accumulated weight of it, the frustration, the tiredness sitting in your shoulders. You pull up to the barn. You get out of the car. You walk toward the paddock. Your horse is standing at the fence, and when you reach out your hand, he takes a single step back. You run through the list. Maybe he's sore. Maybe something spooked him earlier. Maybe he's just being difficult today. Here's what was actually happening. Your horse read your face the second you came into view. Not your tone, not your body language, your face. And he already had you categorized before you reached the gate. In 2016, researchers at the University of Sussex put photographs of human faces, angry versus happy, in front of horses and measured what happened in the horse's brain and body. When the horses saw angry faces, they showed a left gaze bias. They processed those images through the right hemisphere, the same hemisphere that handles threat detection in virtually every vertebrate species we've ever studied. Heart rate went up. Avoidance behaviors followed. No aggression from the human, no rough handling. A photograph held up by a researcher behind a board. Just the expression, that's all it took. That is where this video starts. Not with dramatic cruelty or obvious abuse, with the everyday things, the habits, the assumptions, the ordinary moments that most horse people never look at twice, that are quietly and precisely destroying the thing you think you're building. Welcome to Horse Mind Channel. If you're new here, subscribe before you leave, because what you're about to learn will change the way you see every horse you've ever met. Today we're going through 10 ordinary things that erode equine trust, drawn from documented research, not from what the internet assumes about horses. Thing number 1. You come in stressed, and you think the horse doesn't know. You've told yourself this. Most people have. The horse is fine. I'll calm down once I'm out here. It doesn't matter that I'm wired from a bad afternoon. It matters. There's solid research on what happens when a human shows up in a physiologically activated state. Elevated heart rate, altered breathing pattern, the neurochemical signature of someone who's been grinding through a hard day, and walks into a space with a horse. The horse's behavior changes. Not because the human did anything, not because the human spoke sharply or moved roughly. The horse read the incoming signal and adjusted its own state accordingly. The quality of the interaction went down before a single hand was placed on the halter. There was no yelling, no rough handling, just a person carrying the weight of a hard afternoon. And that was enough. So every time you've walked into the barn tight from a rough day and told yourself it doesn't count, it counted. The horse already had you classified before you touched the lead rope. Thing number 2. You had a bad moment with this horse once, and you assume it's behind you. The idea that a horse reads emotion in the moment, fine. Most people accept that. The idea that the horse remembers the read for hours, for months, potentially much longer, that's where it gets uncomfortable. In 2018, Professor Karen McComb at the University of Sussex and Dr. Leanne Proops at the University of Portsmouth published a study in Current Biology that should sit with you for a minute. They showed horses a photograph of a specific person's face, one photograph, seen once, displaying either an angry or a happy expression. Hours later, that same person returned. Neutral state. Nothing threatening, nothing aggressive, just standing there. The horses that had seen the angry photograph treated that person with measurably more wariness. They gazed left, threat detection hemisphere, significantly more than horses who'd seen the happy version of the same face. The horses had no real experience with these people. They saw a photograph, once, and hours later, that single data point was still shaping how they treated a real human being standing in front of them. Dr. Proops noted this was the first time any mammal had been shown to hold and apply emotional memories of specific individual people across contexts in this way. Think about what that means for the horse you handle every day. Every time you arrived frustrated, every time you were short with it, every time you pushed past a signal you should have read. Those moments didn't dissolve when you came back the next morning in a better mood. They're in there, filed under your face, and the horse is holding them up against every encounter since. Thing number 3. You're not the only person handling this horse. On the surface, this seems fine. The horse works with everyone, no obvious problems. So multiple handlers must be okay. When the same signal consistently means the same thing, and the release always comes at the same moment, the horse builds a clear, reliable map. When different handlers apply the same cue differently, different timing, different pressure, different thresholds for what counts as the right response, that map blurs. The horse can no longer predict what its behavior will produce. And horses in unpredictable environments don't just get confused, they start looking for exits. There's a specific term researchers use for what happens when a horse is exposed to enough inescapable inconsistency over time. Learned helplessness. The horse stops trying. Not from exhaustion, from the accumulated evidence that effort and outcome have been decoupled enough times that effort itself has stopped mattering. When nothing you do reliably produces a predictable result, the rational response is to wait and endure rather than engage. The horse that moves quietly through lessons with 5 different instructors never causes problems, never reacts, might not be calm. It might be somewhere considerably further down the road from calm, which is exactly what the next point is about. Thing number 4. You read that quiet as trust, and it is not trust. This is the most dangerous entry on this list, because it looks like success. The horse stands quietly. The horse loads without fuss. The horse moves through the arena without drama. You take this as evidence that the relationship is good, that the work has paid off. What researchers describe as a withdrawn state in horses looks, from the outside, almost identical to what handlers would typically call well-behaved. Low reactivity, reduced response to stimulation, still posture, quiet. The difference shows up in the details, if you know where to look. Chronic ear positions rather than mobile, fluid ones. Eyes that are flat rather than soft. A horse that stops trying to communicate because it has learned that communication doesn't change anything. There's something worth sitting with here. The training methods most likely to produce a horse that appears perfectly obedient are also the methods most likely to produce a horse that is suffering quietly and invisibly. And the people around these horses are often the last to notice, precisely because the horse is behaving so well. Thing number 5. You isolate the horse. Individual stabling is practical. It simplifies management. For many horses, it is also running a low-grade threat signal through the nervous system around the clock. When researchers studied young horses experiencing sudden individual housing for the first time, 67% of those horses developed stereotypies, crib biting, weaving, box walking, within the observation period. Among group-housed horses, the rate was near 0. Other research documented that simply moving a horse from group housing to a single stall produced a measurable cortisol increase within a short window. Horses evolved in herds not for companionship in the sentimental sense, but because the herd was the primary defense against predation. Isolation doesn't register in the horse's nervous system as quiet time. It registers as a predator environment with no backup. A horse living alone for extended periods is running a continuous alarm. And an animal running a continuous alarm is not building trust with the humans who appear twice a day to fill the water bucket. The stereotypies that develop are not vices or bad habits. They are coping mechanisms, the horse doing the only thing available when no other option exists. Physically preventing them with a collar or a grill, which used to be standard practice, doesn't address what's driving them. It just removes the horse's last tool for managing an environment that is, neurologically, frightening. Thing number 6. You punish after the moment is already gone. Everyone who has trained a horse has done this. Something goes wrong. You're managing something else simultaneously. You come back 30 seconds later and apply pressure. The horse has no idea what just happened. The horse's brain assigns cause and effect within a window measured in seconds, not minutes. When consequences arrive late, what gets encoded is not, "I should not do that." What gets encoded is, "I cannot predict what causes discomfort." Those are entirely different pieces of information, and only one of them is useful for training. The other one just makes the horse permanently watchful. There's also what delayed and unpredictable aversion does to the learning system itself over time. Repeated exposure to consequences that can't be anticipated or avoided doesn't produce a more careful horse. It produces a horse whose capacity for flexible learning is literally impaired. The brain shifts away from goal-directed thinking and toward rigid habit and survival responses. A horse trained primarily through inconsistent punishment is not learning your system, it is bracing. Thing number 7. You force the introduction. The horse is nervous about something new. You bring the thing closer. You hold the horse in place. You wait until it stops reacting. You call it desensitization. Research comparing forced exposure with approaches that gave horses more autonomy in how they encountered stressors found something counterintuitive. Forced handling did reduce emotional reactivity over time. The horses became visibly less reactive. But forced handling did not improve the horse's relationship with humans. The human-animal relationship score didn't benefit. In some measures, the horses subjected to forced exposure were harder to work with when conditions became genuinely demanding. What looks like progress, the horse standing still, no longer reacting, is, in a number of these cases, the horse reaching the end of its options rather than deciding the situation was safe. A horse that has stopped reacting because it has run out of moves is not a horse that trusts you. It's a horse that has learned you won't stop regardless of what it does. Those two things can look identical from the outside. They feel completely different to the horse. Thing number 8. You pat instead of scratch. This one sounds trivial. It isn't. The kind of physical contact horses perform on each other, allogrooming, sustained rhythmic pressure along the withers and crest, triggers a measurable hormonal response. Oxytocin goes up. Heart rate often goes down. The contact says, in the horse's nervous system, that this individual is safe to be close to. It is a bonding signal. When you slap a horse on the neck the way you'd congratulate a colleague, you're not communicating the same thing. The contact is too brief, too sharp, too different from what social grooming actually feels like to another horse. The horse tolerates it. But it doesn't produce the same neurochemical response. The way you choose to touch your horse is not just a habit or a preference. It is, in the horse's body, a statement about what you are, and whether being near you is something worth seeking. Thing number 9. You train primarily through pressure. Most horse training runs on negative reinforcement. Pressure applied, pressure removed when the horse responds. This works. Horses learn tasks. But alongside the learning, something else is being encoded that most trainers don't account for. In 2010, researchers at the University of Rennes trained 2 groups of ponies, one with positive reinforcement, one with negative reinforcement. Same tasks, same timeframes. Then they tested how those ponies behaved toward humans in general, including complete strangers they had never encountered. Ponies trained with positive reinforcement approached both the trainer and the strangers more readily. They spent more time in voluntary proximity. They showed fewer stress behaviors. And this held 8 months after the training program ended. 5 days of sessions that lasted 1 to 3 minutes each. The researchers described it as a deep, long-lasting trace in the ponies' memories. Not just a trace of the tasks they learned. A trace that changed how they perceived humans as a category. Strangers they'd never met. That is the thing that tends to get glossed over in conversations about training methodology. You are not only teaching a behavior, you are teaching the horse what you are. If the primary lesson your horse has taken from every interaction with you is that discomfort ends when it complies, you have a horse that works to avoid you, not to be near you. That can look fine for a long time, until it doesn't. Thing number 10, keep this one. Everything in this video comes back to a single mechanism that most people don't fully reckon with until they understand how the horse's brain actually encodes experience. We talk about equine memory in vague terms. Horses never forget. Horses have good memories. The research is more specific than that, and the specificity is what changes everything. The Sussex and Portsmouth photograph study showed that one brief exposure to an image was enough to generate a behavioral response hours later in a real-world encounter. The Rennes research showed that 5 days of 1 to 3 minute sessions produced changes that lasted 8 months and extended to strangers the ponies had never met. The horse's brain does not build trust the way we tend to imagine it, as a slow, steady accumulation of good days stacking up until the relationship is solid. It builds trust through specific, precisely encoded moments. The moment you felt the right response coming and released at exactly the right second. The moment you let the horse move away from something frightening instead of holding it in place. The moment you came in after a hard day and took 60 seconds to breathe before you put a hand on the halter. These get stored. So do the moments in the other direction. And here's what sits with me every time I come back to this research. The Sussex photograph study showed that one angry expression altered how a horse treated a neutral person for hours. But the Rennes work showed the inverse is equally true. A few minutes of genuinely positive, well-timed interaction produced a trace that softened those ponies' perception of humans as a category for months. Not just toward the trainer who did the sessions, toward strangers. The horse updated its model of what humans are, based on a few careful minutes with one person. You are not in a long war of attrition with your horse's wariness. You are in a sequence of moments. Some of them matter more than others. The ones where you came in calm, where you read the signal correctly, where you chose to scratch instead of slap, where you let the horse make a choice and then rewarded that choice. Those are encoding right now. They are building something that will outlast your worst days and your worst sessions. The horse you thought you knew is running a continuous assessment, not of your intentions. Horses don't process intentions. They process what happened last time, and the time before that, and the pattern those instances make. That pattern is the relationship, not what you feel about it in the car on the way home. One practical thing. Before you go to your horse tomorrow, spend 60 seconds doing something genuinely low pressure. Stand near it without an agenda. Scratch slowly along the crest and withers the way another horse would. Breathe. You are both reading each other. You are both capable of helping the other settle. That 60 seconds is not a warm-up routine. To the horse, it is a statement, and the horse is listening to it. Before I go, I want to hear from you. Think of one specific moment with a horse that you now understand differently after watching this. Not a general feeling, a real moment, a real horse. What happened, and what do you think was going on for it? I read every single one. See you in the next one.